My pleasure to introduce Matt Geer. Most of you are familiar with him or know him, but Matt's a lifetime Springfield resident. We don't have too many of those in the town, but he's lived in Springfield Township all his life, and son of Cliff and Nancy Geer, and used to live in my house, I think, at one point in time.
Until I was 2.
Until you were 2.
Yeah.
So, but again, lived in the area. He's part of our church. He's part of our community. He's a high school track coach down at Troy, and also has his own business, a financial advisor on Canton Street in Troy. I won't steal all of his thunder, but I'm sure he's going to cover part of that. But my pleasure to have Matt come and share about his life a little bit.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. And as I'm trying to pull up what I was going to say, thanks for having me this morning. It's an honor to speak in front of all you guys. It's a pretty good group of guys in here this morning. And my wife accused me of trying to push too much into this. So I've tried to narrow it down. But when Brian first asked me if I would speak, I asked him what should I talk about? And he said, well, the history of the church and the men's breakfast is that we would read a person's obituary and we'd be like, oh, I didn't know that about him. And we wish we'd learned more about him and formed a connection. And then in church on Sunday, Jamie got up and said, come see Matt give his powerful testimony on how he came to Christ and his walk with God. And I thought, oh man, that's not what I wrote. So this will be somewhere in between. I'm not very comfortable talking about myself. And I think that's probably why I had a hard time writing about it. I joked with some people, I thought I should make this a question and answer session. What do you want to know about me? I'll tell you. But to kind of give you the obituary stuff out of the way. So I thought I could start with that. So as Brian said, I was born here. Cliff and Nancy are my parents. Cy and Cleo were my grandparents on my mom's side. If you remember Cy and Cleo, they had the store here on the corner in Springfield. And I went to the academy, the Coast Guard Academy out of high school. I served in the Coast Guard for 9 years total. Moved back to the area. So I didn't live here all my life. There was a 10-year period where I was living across the country. Moved back. Track coach. Member of the church. I've got a lovely wife in Gretchen who keeps me grounded, and 2 kids, Elizabeth and Evan. Elizabeth's in college. Evan's a senior this year in high school. Sit on too many boards. Help out with Kids Can't Fight Cancer Alone, the NTUAA, the Northern Tier Unified Arts Association. I'm in a Rotary. I was in the foundation. I joke that my wife says I have to cut back. I coach down at the gym in town. And maybe an anecdote about me that you can ask me about later. I once ran 50 kilometers to raise $50,000 for the Troy Food Pantry. If anybody remembers me having to raise money for that. Guire, I gave a sermon because you gave us too much money. So I said I'd have to pay you guys back with a sermon.
I think he's paying for it right now.
Yeah, no, I am, yeah. And I don't think this is going to work, so we're just going to go off the top of my head of what I wrote down. And then potentially, and this is kind of like the fun side of things, potentially I heard someone say Viking heritage. So if you see John at my funeral firing an arrow into a funeral pyre, it's because I've told him that he has to do that at my funeral because my brother once did a DNA test and it said we were Vikings. I have no idea if that's true. But I thought that was good. But my hope today is that I can recall some life experiences and you can see how God has weaved his way through my life. And hopefully my theme is kind of iron sharpens iron. I was talking with Pastor Din about it, about what should I say. And he said, hey, this is a good way to, if you don't know from Proverbs 27, it says, iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. So my hope is that maybe some of my life experiences will help sharpen you guys to be better men in your community, well, our community, as we go out from here. I was recently thinking about, many of you knew Roger Lathrop, and he passed away, and one of his favorite verses was from Ecclesiastes, where, a rope of 3 cords is not easily broken. And of course they're talking about, a man and a woman coming together, and then the third chord being God weaving their way in through life and making that line stronger than if it was just two chords. So God has weaved his way through my life and has strengthened me in many, many occasions, and I hope that you can see that it's necessary for you guys so that he can strengthen your chord. So when a lot of people give a testimony, I don't know if I like that word, but if they give a testimony, they usually talk about the hardship they overcame, they hit rock bottom, they had a drug addiction, or they had anger issues, or a variety of things. I had to overcome a loving and caring family and community that only wanted what was best for me. It was rough. It was really rough. So, no, I consider myself blessed. As I was thinking about men who sharpened me, it all starts in this church. I think of Jim and Lisa Krupe. I think of Brian and Carol Canfield, Dale and Janet Maddox, my grandparents, and especially my mom and dad. They set me up from a very young age here in this church to learn what it means to be a Christian. And I don't know, I was talking with Evan about it last night, and we're just going to put this away because I was talking about it with Evan last night, and he has a similar experience. He's grown up in a church his whole life. He's got parents that are Christians, and he was baptized about the same age I was baptized. I couldn't tell you. I was either 10 or 11 years old, maybe 12. And I remember Carol's Sunday school class and youth group with Brian and Carol, and they talked about the importance of baptism. And if you believe that Christ had been raised from the dead and profess it with your mouth, that hey, you're there. All you have to do now is your first act of obedience is to get baptized. And I was like, that makes sense to me. I don't know if I knew the ins and outs of Reformed theology or what my eschatological view was at the time. It was zero. I had none. All I knew was it made sense. But as is my nature, I question everything. And I like to question authority a lot. You might not know that about me, but that's how that's been refined throughout the ages. I don't know if that's a good quality of mine. But I remember I didn't want to get baptized unless I really meant it. So I went home and I peppered my mom with hundreds of questions. And I came to the realization that, I believe this. And the one thing I didn't ask, and I think this is probably the guy who's refined me the most, is my dad, is I didn't ask him a thing because I saw it every day in his life. If you know my dad, as he gets older here, he doesn't say no. And it's a quality put into me, and unfortunately it's a quality I put into my son when people ask me if I'll help. Yes. What do you need? My wife hates that. So does my mom. And so will Evan's wife. So we can't say no, but that stems from my dad. And I can remember sitting at my red Formica kitchen table, because my mom decorated everything in Coke at the time. I'm not sure why. We really supported the Coca-Cola company. That if Dad believed it, then it had to be true. And so I think that's a lesson for fathers here. If you're going to raise your kids, not only tell them about Christ or tell them about being Christian, but to also show it. And I think my dad showed that to me the most. So from there, that started my journey. And this is what I was talking about Evan last night. He was like, Dad, I think I need to be rebaptized. And I said, why do you say that? Because I was trying to tell him what I was going to say today. And he's like, well, because I've kind of come to the realization that when I was baptized, it made sense, but now I really know. And I was like, no, you don't. I was like, none of us do. None of us do. And I was like, and it was the same for me. I had a small seed of faith, and I jumped into being baptized with that. And from there, God has then grown a faith in me. I told him the same thing. I said, when you were baptized, I was worried that I was pressuring you into doing it. And now he's like, but he goes, now I understand what you were saying. And I was like, well, yeah, it's the same for me. So if you just have, I guess, if there's a message here, if you have a small, minuscule, tiny bit of faith, and you're like, yeah, I believe that, I was like, jump in. Start your journey of faith, and you'll see what God will grow in you. So my dad was kind of the first iron sharpening iron in my life. Not to say that the women of this church didn't do their fair of beating me too. So I say that jokingly. No, they were wonderful. My mom maybe did beat me. Anecdotally, when I was younger, I got in trouble so much that my dad took me out to a wood shop, had me pull a piece of wood off the wall, and my first woodworking experience was making my own paddle. And then they hung it next to the fridge as a reminder. So that's the kind of kid I was, but I've grown up since then. On my mom's side, my mom is who brought my dad to faith. If you don't know his story, I'd encourage you to ask him that. After they got married, she took him to church for the first time. But she was the one who was a driving force. And not that I don't get along with my father, we get along great, but if there's a parent you kind of lean to as the middle child, I could get my mom's attention. So I'd often do that. And she was really good at teaching me about the faith too. And this is going to sound wrong, but if there's the stereotype that Jewish moms or Italian moms can manipulate their kids into doing things, they've got nothing on Nancy Geer. Because she does it so subtly. You don't know it, but you have been steered in a direction. When I was in 6th grade, she was chaperoning a school trip, and they visited the Naval Academy. And looking ahead as she's like, well, I don't know how we're going to afford to send 3 kids to college. Here is a free way to send a kid to college. And she was really impressed with the Naval Academy. So as a teenager, we'd spend days up at Watkins Glen on Dad's boat. And there was nothing to do, right? Pre-cell phone, pre-computers. So I used to ride my bike all over town. And there was a used bookstore, and I loved 25 cents. You could get a novel. If you returned it within 7 days, you got your quarter back. And so I used to voraciously read through novels, not all good ones, but hey, for a quarter, I would attempt it. My mom came back from that and said, have you ever read Tom Clancy? Or, have you ever read Clive Cussler? Who talk all about, the heroes of being in the military. It's all fiction. And I fell in love. About that time, Top Gun came out. And I was like, yep, I'm going to be an F-14 Tomcat pilot. That's the thing. It's my sole goal in life. I got to get into the Naval Academy. And so from 6th grade, my mom had planted that seed, and that's what I was going to do. So I tried to work towards that. So from about 7th grade onwards, that was my goal. I was going to get in the Naval Academy. Up until my junior year of high school, Matt York, I don't know if anybody knows Matt. He came back to talk about how he had gone to the Coast Guard Academy and how he enjoyed it. And I thought, I should probably try to have options in case I don't get in. And so they had a summer program where you could go spend a week as a swab, test it out, see if you like it, and learn about the Coast Guard. And so I applied for that, I got into it, and I fell in love. And then I think where God kind of directed me here was I got really far in the process of the Naval Academy. You have to get an appointment from your congressman. So I was doing interview after interview down in Harrisburg. I got all the way to DC, and I remember I was in a panel of, it was like 8, and I mean no offense, old white guys who looked like they had seen everything from World War II on. And I got asked this question, and the question was, hey, given a direct order, you want to be a pilot. Given a direct order, are you going to pull the trigger and make the strike? You don't know you have no idea what's going on, you were just given an order. And I thought long and hard of it, and I gave an answer that was off the cuff that I thought I wanted to hear, but as I got in the car, I was driving home, I was like, man, I don't know if I could. And so I struggled with that. And so I guess another thing to refine you is I started talking with some men in the church about what to do, and I came to the realization, I'm praying about it, is that I could go into an academy that, potentially could have me kill people I don't know. And I'm not saying anything against the Navy, the Marine Corps, or anything like that. Or I could go to the Coast Guard, still get a military experience, but their prime mission was search and rescue, saving lives. And I thought, as a Christian, which one lines more with my values? So I thought, man, now I want to go to the Coast Guard Academy. Saving lives seems a lot more exciting orders I could follow than it could be taking lives. So, and I'm not disparaging the other military. Amongst other service members, yes, I'll disparage the other side of the military. Me and Andrew go back and forth all the time. But no, they definitely do have a God-given purpose as well. So I applied to the Coast Guard Academy, and then God made it easy. I didn't get into the Naval Academy, but the Coast Guard Academy accepted me. So that started kind of the next journey in my life. And I say that then starts probably the 4 hardest years of my life. I don't know if you guys have an idea what goes on at a service academy. It's changed throughout the years. To give you kind of an idea, my class was on the cusp of kind of how they changed leadership styles. Because it was, the thought when I went in was, we're going to put as much pressure on them as possible to see who can hold up under it. And we'll, those who make it through are good leaders. I'm not sure if that's true. We started with 340 kids in my class. We graduated 140. Swab summer, which July 10th was my reporting day, till the start of the first semester, we lost 100 kids. It was brutal. Anyone who's gone through boot camp can tell you it's intense. I can remember, I remember a lot. I went in 130 pounds. I ran probably 10 miles every day. We dried off the grass at 5:45 every morning. That was literally going out and rolling on the grass to dry it off before you did your calisthenics. I think we set a record. Now, they're BSing you, but you set a record because we did like 2,000 push-ups in one day. I put on 20 pounds during 8 weeks, and it was solid muscle because that's all they did was run, push you, and see how hard you could do. So we lost 100 kids just that summer alone. My first semester, to kind of put the pressure on you, I don't know, college, I make fun of my daughter because she has 14 credit hours this semester, and she thinks that a lot. I had 26 credit hours my first semester, which included chemistry, physics, biology, calculus, and English. And I thought English is going to be the easy one. I know how to write papers. I got my first paper back. I had a C+. I was a little down. The girl next to me is crying. And I look at her, and she holds it up, and there was just a big circle written on it. And in the margin, the professor had written, "This is a 0. Do not mistake me, this is not an F. That would be an insult to those I gave Fs to." And I hugged my C+. And thought, oh, this is a whole other nature. So I went from, I was top of my class at high school to having my first semester a 1.42 GPA. I didn't fail a thing, but I had a lot of D's for done. And at that point, I went into survival mode. Because not only are the academic pressure is there, they also have the military pressure. You still have to, listen to the upper class as they beat the snot out of you every day. To give you an example, we had formations at 6 o'clock, formations at noon, formations at 4 p.m. And we had to memorize, I brought it with me, this book. It's called The Running Light, and if you can see how small the print in it is, there's a lot of information in here. And so that the upper class wasn't late to formation, you had to stand under a clock and just scream at the top of your lungs what time it was and recite this from memory, whatever you could. And if you didn't, you were doing push-ups again, or you were getting restricted. So you lost your liberty. So then, it's just miserable. And Mom and Dad aren't here to attest to it. I'm going to say I survived it well. No, I was writing home every day talking about how I was going to quit the academy. I couldn't take it anymore. I hated it. And Mom sent me a Bible with verses highlighted. So this is my second thing here. Philippians 4, and it's kind of funny we're doing Philippians in youth group. Philippians 4, 6 through 8. I summarize it as worry about nothing, pray about everything, be thankful for anything you get.
Right.
And so that became my mantra at the academy. I just prayed constantly. I tried not to worry. And I just, at some point, I existed out of spite. It wasn't the best time of my life. On top of that, the church community at the academy wasn't necessarily the best. They had 2 services on Sunday. That was the only place you could go hide. And it was either you went to the Catholic service or you went to the whatever Protestant ecumenical person they brought in that day. So I got to experience the full gamut of Protestantism because one day it would be a Baptist, the next Sunday it would be the Presbyterian, then it would be the Methodist, and I tried to all right, I'm gonna find other Christians. We're gonna form a group, and what I found out was there were a lot of people that were just hiding that weren't Christians. I got bitter towards that, and I just stopped going, and so it was really not a good time for me. So don't do that. So if you think, come to church, find Christians that you can. We're all in different parts of our walk, but I don't think you'll find fake Christians here. So, or find them in Troy, but find a group of Christians that can help you. And the next person that kind of refined me, or was my iron sharpening iron, was my. By the time I got to my sophomore year, was my roommate from then on, Brian McLaughlin, a self-avowed atheist who was one of the funniest guys I knew. So that's going to sound bad. But because he was a self-avowed atheist, we had wonderful conversations. We never argued. He'd be like, why do you believe this? And I'd be like, all right, well, I don't know. So I because I was still young in my faith. So I was like, well, I got to defend this. So I called around to my dad, a couple other people. I think I got Josh McDowell's Evidence to Advance a Verdict. Mm-hmm. I can't think of the other one. I had it written down. But I started reading those, and so we started going back and forth. I was like, all right, well, hey, I don't know, but this guy says this, and it makes sense to me. And so for 3 years we had those debates, and we became best friends. I also, shared misery bonds people. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So we had shared some misery. So even though we were kind of different perspectives, religious, we were joined at the hip. I say all this because he sharpened me to be a better Christian, and in some ways I sharpened him. Because fast forward down the line, probably my favorite phone call in the world was when he called me from stationed in Mobile, Alabama. He'd just been baptized, and he was apologizing. And I was like, "There's no need to apologize, Brian. We were still friends." I was like, "He's like, no, I treated you bad," and I was like, "I didn't take it that way." So yeah. So now he's still in the Coast Guard. No, he retired. I'm trying to think. I've been to so many retirement ceremonies in the last year. Yeah, he retired this year from Sitka, Alaska, and he's up there running a youth group himself. So it's kind of funny. So kind of that academy experience both was a downtime for me, and also I have a lot of great experiences from there. So kind of on the obituary side of things, I can't complain. I got to go to Germany, Amsterdam, Dublin. I got to see most of the country. I spent a summer in Charlevoix, Michigan on an ice-breaking tug in the summer. Mm-hmm. Wasn't a whole lot of ice-breaking to do. So we became a PR ship. That's what they do in the summer. They just go, we went to Chicago for, I forget what the festival was. It was awesome. We went to Traverse City. I got to be the guest judge at the Cherry Festival pageant. Not a bad gig. We went all over the Great Lakes, just trying to make people like the Coast Guard, and of course they did because we kept the lanes open during the winter. But that was the boondoggle of my career. That was really good. going to Europe, I got to sail a tall ship, and growing up a sailor, that was like the epitome of my career, sailing career. I went back to Seneca Lake and I just bragged. I was like, oh yeah, you guys went to Ontario. I sailed across the Atlantic, on a sailing boat. So that was really good. And I made some lifelong friends at the academy, so I can't complain about that. We're still friends today. Like I said, shared misery bonds you forever. But then I graduated, and Brian was the anchor cadet. So we lost 100 during swap summer. We then lost another 100 throughout the next 4 years. So we went from 340 down to 140. Brian was number 140. He was what we call the anchor cadet because he was the last one in the class to graduate. I was 10 above him. I was 130th. And so when you graduate, you get assigned your next duty station, and based on your class rank, you get first pick of where you want to go. 130th doesn't get, you get what's left over. So there was another time relying on God. I knew, I just prayed, you put in your wish list, and I knew I was getting none of them. I was just, put me where I'm supposed to be. And he put me on a 210-foot medium endurance cutter out of Cape May, New Jersey, called the Vigorous. Which one of my really good friends, Jeff Apps, got assigned to as well. And Jeff was from Delaware, which was great because then it was only 30 minutes to his house to eat food with his parents. So that worked out. That worked out wonderful. And getting out of the academy, I started thriving again. I found a church in Cape May. And it was all thanks to, and this is kind of the next man that refined me, was Sam Jackson. Sam was on the ship as well. And Sam remembered me, and he said, hey, I think you're a Christian. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, hey, I want to put a Bible study on. So our ship was 4 officers and the captain and 76 enlisted guys. He's like, we don't have a chaplain. I want to do a Bible study. And I want to make sure these guys have an opportunity. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that, Sam. I said, I guess I don't know enough. And so then he invited me over, and about that time, we both got married. He got married to a wonderful woman named Lauren. I got married to Gretchen, and we started a home Bible study between the two of us. And Sam taught me more than I don't want to say than this church did. That's wrong. They were teaching me. I just wasn't listening. But for the first time, I started kind of internalizing it. And it got me back into the faith, and I realized that if I was going to be married, and I guess as men, as much as the society doesn't want it to be patriarchal, Christianity is. So I was like, if I'm going to be the head of a household and we're going to raise kids, I better know what I'm doing. So I credit Sam Jackson. He was my iron at that point. I give him all the credit. And getting married is its own thing. I'm sure you guys understand. I have this written down. This was not very good. This is where I have trouble. But Gretchen and I both started going to church. We found a great church in Cape May. If you're ever down there, it looks like the Alamo. It's all stucco. It's so out of place. It's weird. But it's a great church, great people down there. And that really brought me back to a better relationship with God. I'd been kind of ignoring him, and Sam got me back into remembering who he was. And so I would say, this iron sharpens iron. You got to find men in your life that are going to keep you accountable. And Sam kept me accountable. I have it written down here. Marriage, the guy who kept me, started sharpening me there was Gretchen's dad, Scott. I had kind of known Scott, just being around Gretchen. But Scott had a great faith. And so when I got to be careful. I don't want to share too much dirty laundry. But when he first moved back to the area after I got out of the Coast Guard, and that's a whole other story, we had to move in with Pat and Scott. And if the academy was the 4 longest years of my life, that 3 months with Pat and Scott, I don't want to say it was long, but when you have 2 families trying to live together. But Scott and I got along famously. Gretchen moving back in with her parents was not a good thing. Scott and I mowed the lawn a lot. That was the best that house ever looked. But Scott and I, well, we found refuge in each other, so that was good. That was good, and he helped me find a house really quick. But so that was good. But my time in the Coast Guard was great. So kind of the obituary stuff. I loved being in the Coast Guard. We were stationed at Cape May, New Jersey, but we went as far north as Halifax, Canada, as far south as the Caribbean, and a month after I was there, we got a brand new captain, and he must have had good standing because we had a sister ship on the pier with us, and we'd swap. So when one was out, the other was in. We'd go out for 3 months at a time. We always got the Caribbean in the winter, and they got it in the summer. And we always got the North Atlantic in the summer, and they got, so I had a good experience. Now, we did do one patrol in the winter, and it was freezing up there. There's nothing like the North Atlantic storms, and everyone on the crew had to go out with a baseball bat to beat the ice off the ship so it didn't become too top heavy. I mean, that's kind of the experience you get. Our primary mission was search and rescue, but we also did a lot of drug and migrant interdiction, and we also did a lot of just patrolling. But I got a chance to do a lot of good works there, I think. I was trying to think of all the things we did. My favorite might have been Christmas Day. We were on patrol in the North Atlantic over Christmas and New Year's. And, everyone's away from their family. They're feeling down. They're feeling sad. And for Christmas Day, we went and anchored inside the hook of Cape Cod to get away from a storm. And it was a pretty nasty storm. And about halfway through Christmas Day, we have to go out. There's a fishing vessel sinking off the Greater Banks, the Grand Banks, and it's too nasty for helicopters to go get them. And it was too far. It was about 300 miles. And so we steamed out, and there's a saying in the Coast Guard when someone's going away, you say fair winds and following seas, because that sounds nice and pleasant. The fair winds is pleasant. Following seas has got to be the worst thing in your life. All right, so I should probably preface, when do you know a sailor is lying? When he says, let me tell you about the sea story. So some of this might be embellished a little. For 3 days we steamed through 30 to 40 foot waves, and they were behind us. So we had a following sea. And what that does is as the ship comes up, as the wave picks up the stern of the ship, as you get to the crest of the wave, your engines and your rudders come out, and you lose control, and the ship slides sideways, and then you go sideways down the wave as it passes under you. To say that all 76 of us were the sickest dogs you've ever seen, because it was just a routine roll of about 30 degrees to the right, then a routine roll of 30 degrees to the left. And I remember that because everyone was so sick. There was only 4 of us that really weren't. I mean, I was throwing up, but I wasn't incapacitated. So for 48 hours, I stood watch because there were only 4 of us that could. And we got out there about a day later, found the guy, found the crew, and never heard such joy on our radio. And it made us all feel, really good. So that was fun. But I say all that because in the midst of that, when we were feeling the most miserable, the most things, I remember praying a lot because a 30-foot roll, if this is 45 degrees, 30 degrees, try standing on that and then going back and forth. We weren't sure the ship was going to make it. The ship was built in 1941. It was a World War II ship. We weren't sure the ship was going to make it. So there was a lot of praying. And I remember at the heart of a storm, when we were rolling and everyone was feeling most miserable and you're just hanging on for dear life, I looked out and at the top of a wave, and we're talking big waves, this humpback whale just breached and then slapped down into the trough of the wave. And I thought, I didn't just see that. And so, I yell over, and then we saw it, and then pretty soon a couple more were doing it. And we got laughing. We're like, here we are, thinking we're about to die, and these whales are over here having the time of their life in the storm. And I took it as a sign from God that, hey, you guys are going to be okay. And so then, kind of going back to that Philippians 4:6, I stopped worrying. I kept praying, and I was thankful that we got there. We effected the rescue. We pulled the guy back in, and it was really good. But other than that, most of our days are pretty mundane. But I loved being on the ocean. But I got out of it because my daughter was born. So if I had bragging rights about sailing a tall ship across the Atlantic, when it came up for whether I was going to stay in the Coast Guard or not, they assigned if I stayed in, they were going to assign me to that ship. I was going to be on it for 2 years. So if you guys don't know, it's the Coast Guard cutter Eagle. It's a 3-masted bark. It's 290 feet long. It's a war prize from World War II. It's probably the coolest looking tall ship out there. I'm biased. But I was going to be assigned on it for 2 years. But it's a training ship and it's a PR ship. And I got the assignment about 4 months after Elizabeth was born. And because it's so involved in PR and it just circumnavigates the world the whole time, I was going to be gone for 600 days of those 2 years. And by the time I got back, Elizabeth would be 3. And I thought, so I don't know if it was a test from God, but it was one of those things where I really had to pray about it. And I was like, am I supposed to go to what I think is a dream assignment, or am I supposed to start raising my daughter and helping my wife out as a new family member? And what came back to me was, no, you should be a father. And so it's time to stop playing in the Coast Guard, go be a father. And that's when we made the decision, because as a husband and wife, you should make decisions together. So we made the decision to get out of the Coast Guard and then decided to move back to Troy. And I've lost the iron sharpening iron because somebody else was in there. But that was when I guess my wife and I really started having good conversations about what we wanted together and what we believed. I mean, we were 22 when we got married, so maybe we didn't have all those discussions that we should have had. But we started really talking to each other and relying on each other. And then, of course, we had kids. I can't say enough about them. They're awesome. If you don't know them, I'll introduce you sometime. Elizabeth will be mortified that I said that. Evan will talk your ear off. Evan's pretty good. But we moved back to the Troy area because I felt led that we should come back to the Troy area. And that's when I met probably the next guy that really started refining me or helping sharpen was Ozzy Osgood. He moved back at the same time, and he said he had been praying about it, and he felt like God was leading him to come back to Bradford County to preach the word, because he'd just been doing 10 years of seminary, working his way through it. And so he started coming we were at the First Baptist Church in Troy at the time, because that's where we were living, and we really got to know each other, and I thought I'd been doing better. I was getting through my Bible, I was understanding it better. And Ozzy proved to me that I didn't know anything either. So like I said, when you think you know something, you don't. And so then I started meeting with Ozzy, and we were both involved in the church quite a bit, so we relied on each other. And he really gave me a new perspective. I think one of the dangers of Christianity is that we have a faith that's a mile wide, but it's an inch thick. And so we have to continue deepening our faith. We might not understand it at first, but I think that's what Ozzy refined in me, is I needed to deepen my faith and understand why, some of the underlying beliefs, where they come from, how to interpret Scripture better. And so Ozzy was that iron sharpening iron for me. And then through circumstances, we moved back here, and we moved coming back to this church. My dad gave me, when we first moved back, I said, hey, where should we go to church? And Dad said, go to the church of the community you're in. And so we were living downtown Troy. And so Gretchen had gone to the First Baptist Church there, so we were like, yeah, we'll go there. And then when we moved back out here, other circumstances I won't go into, we're like, we really should start coming to the Springfield Baptist Church, because the men and women there are solid, and we really need that right now. And so we did, and the men and women here are solid. So I said the guys you're finding me now are the Dean Jacksons, the Richard Cobies, Pastor Aamir, Jamie, Brian Still. Brian, you've had more influence on me than you ever know. My coaching track is based on how you coach, which I always thought was top notch. And so so we're now back in this community, kind of refining each other, and hopefully I'm helping sharpen others as we help sharpen each other. Alan, I didn't mean to exclude you. You're right there. And Bill's here. I mean, there are a lot of good men. Scott, there are a lot of good men in this church, and I would say we need this community of guys, and I'm glad we're all here today, because if I could drive home one message, is you can't do it on your own. You need a good group of guys to refine each other. And I've got my church guys, and then I've got my solid group of friends. John's here. I won't get into what we call each other. But there's a solid group of guys there that are convicted in their faith, that help sharpen each other and keep each other accountable. And if you can find that, then your walk with God is going to be that much easier. I didn't get into a whole lot of my down periods, because I certainly had them. And by no means am I perfect or have it. I think, Pastor, you say it quite a bit, but man, you say you're the best sinner, I've got you outdone. So we got to keep kind of working together with men and women, but to refine ourselves to be better Christians so that we can raise better Christians.